Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. Chairman, distinguished elders, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. I was very moved by your words. As a young man, I'm sure that I started out on this odyssey before you were born. And I promise you that I will continue it until I'm dead, and that the last word on my lips will be Palestine. And after me will come my sons and my daughters until Palestine is free. This is the pledge that I give you. I'm very happy indeed to be back in this hall. I have very fond memories of it. This is, I think, the third time I have spoken here. My comrade Lamis Jamal Deek is my normal host here in this hall, and I'm glad that she is with us this evening. And I'm glad also to be in the middle of a speaking tour of the United States, 15 speeches across many states and cities. Tomorrow I'm in Milwaukee, the next day in Chicago, on Friday I'm in Miami, and then in Dallas, and then Houston, and then Phoenix, Arizona. I hope they don't take me for a Mexican. And I'm doing all of that in support of the AMP, which, as I said earlier, is a simply outstanding organization whose work I wholeheartedly support. I just arrived at JFK Airport a few hours ago, and so for me it's 3:30 in the morning because I flew from London. So if there's a lack of dynamism in my presentation, I hope you will understand why. And every time that I arrive, and I'm now arriving on a weekly basis, I pick up from my Google alerts on the on my email account, the latest assault, ad hominem, lying assault by the pro-Israel lobby in this country, which seeks to paint me and seeks to paint you by extension as some kind of terrorist danger to the United States. So you'll forgive me if I have to go through this routine at every meeting, because for sure there's an FBI man in the room, and probably someone from one of the Zionist organizations also. In fact, if we're lucky, there'll be several. And so I have to go through this routine because I have to continue to enter this country, because I believe that fighting to change hearts and minds in this country, as I said earlier, is the most important thing that I can be doing with the talents that God gave me. First of all, I'm not here to preach any kind of harm against the United States of America. As some of you have heard me say before, I happen to be almost certainly the only great-grandson of a woman who emigrated from New York to Dundee in Scotland, where I was born. And if you've ever seen Dundee, and you've certainly seen New York, you'll realize what a peculiar decision that was. Maybe she got on the wrong boat, but that's what she did. And if she didn't, I wouldn't be here. I have American blood in my veins. In any case, only a madman could hate the United States of America, could hate this immense, God-given, wonderful country with all its achievements and all that it can be. On the contrary, I'm here to agree with General Petraeus, which is not something I ever thought I'd find myself saying. But General Petraeus, in front of the Armed Services Committee just a few weeks ago, said, and I'm quoting him, that the United States' unequal relationship with Israel has become a strategic liability to the United States. This is the first time that this L word has been used by such a prominent figure in United States life, such an important figure, in front of such an important committee of Congress. And it's my belief, it's my honest belief, that General Petraeus is right, and that therefore it's in the interests of the United States that this relationship is changed, that some kind of balance enters into US policy in the Middle East, and that that's in the interests of the people of this country, whose relations with the rest of the world, whose interests and even security, for that's what General Petraeus was talking about, the security of the people of the United States and your country's legitimate interests are endangered and imperiled by the widespread perception based on fact that the United States is deeply complicit in a very great crime. And I know a lot about that crime because for the last almost 25 years I have sat in the British Parliament where that crime was authored, where Mr. Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, gave away a land which, even in imperial terms, Britain did not possess, to a group of European settlers called the Zionists, none of whom were religious, by the way, even though they later claimed some biblical justification for their colonization. At root, they were a group of European atheist Jews who wanted to found a settler state, just like the other European settler states elsewhere in the world. So my country authored that tragedy, but your country is now deeply complicit in the crimes of that settler state. If we authored the Palestinian tragedy, the United States now funds and arms that tragedy. And that gives us a link over the Atlantic, gives us a special responsibility and duty, wajib, to try to do something about it. And so I come in peace to the United States of America on a weekly basis, armed only with my thoughts and my words about Palestine. But it's those thoughts and those words that are really frightening the Israel lobby here in this country. The latest one today, some Emerson figure who styles himself as a counter-terrorism expert, paints a picture of me that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But let me state unequivocally for the record, I hate terrorism. Terrorism, which is the political violence against innocent and defenseless and randomly selected people, is a sin in any religion, is a crime in any language. In my own constituency, on the 7th of July, 2005, I had to go into the underground station in London whilst the dead and maimed bodies were being carried to the surface as a result of an act of mass murder in London, which cost the lives of 55 people and maimed horrifically hundreds more, none of whom was personally responsible or guilty of any crime at all. Indeed, given that London was overwhelmingly against the war in Iraq and overwhelmingly sympathetic to our position on Palestine, it's very likely that a very substantial number of those killed and maimed were not only innocent of any wrongdoing, but were almost certainly supporters of our just cause. But what I will never accept from Mr. Emerson or any of these other dogs that bark as this caravan moves through the United States is that terrorism is as they define it. You see, for them, terrorism is something carried out by a man with a turban and a beard living in the Tora Bora. And it's true that that man is responsible for many acts of terrorism. But terrorism can also be carried out by men in suits, in the White House, in Whitehall, men who command predator drones to kill innocent people down below who are equally guilty of no crime. Terrorism is the Israeli armed forces raining down death and destruction on people in Lebanon or people in Gaza. I'm against all terrorism, whether it stems from the Tora Bora or from occupied Jerusalem and the cabinet room of Netanyahu, or from the White House, or from Whitehall in London. I'm against all terrorism. Equally, I know this is a bit Donald Rumsfeldish, talking about what I'm not going to be talking about. I'm not here to talk against Jews, some of whom are in the audience this evening and who wholeheartedly support us. Only a racist could be against Jews, just as only a racist could be against blacks or Muslims or Arabs or Asian people. And all of my life I have fought against racism. The people who are whipping up anti-Semitism in the world are those who claim to act on behalf of something they call the Jewish state. We don't accept that nomenclature. We don't accept that there is any synonym between Jews and Zionists. George Bush was a Zionist, but he was not a Jew. A matter of fact, he probably doesn't even like Jews. Certainly there are no Jews in his country club in Texas because they wouldn't have them as members. We celebrate the presence in our movement here in the United States and around the world and in so-called Israel itself of the many Jewish people who stand for justice for Palestine. And we will not accept that by speaking out against the racist apartheid ideology of Zionism that we are in any way against Jews. We simply won't accept it at all. Neither am I here, contrary to what I read on the internet, to support Hamas. This report this morning said I gave millions of dollars to Hamas. What they mean is I gave millions of dollars worth of ambulances and wheelchairs and bread and water and medicine and children's toys to the besieged people of Gaza who are being starved to death to punish their parents for voting in a democratic election for somebody that Britain, America and Israel doesn't like. Let me say again for the avoidance of doubt, I am not a supporter of Hamas, but I am a supporter of democracy. And the only people entitled to choose the leadership of the Palestinian people are the Palestinians themselves and not their enemies and not their usurpers. The chairman in his kind introduction talked about the 3 convoys in the last 12 months or so that I was privileged to lead through the siege into Gaza. And the last time I was here, it's true, I was encouraging people to support these convoys. I don't think I've spoken to you about what happened to us in February, but it's worth doing so for a few minutes this evening. 550 of us drove all the way from London in our ambulances, in our vehicles filled with aid, through Europe, into Greece, from Greece into Turkey, where we aligned ourselves with the greatest humanitarian organization I have ever met, anywhere in the world. The Turkish organization IHH, İHA in Turkish, $120 million a year humanitarian organization, working all over the world, but with special emphasis on Palestine. Our convoy doubled overnight. We were joined by hundreds of Turkish activists. The IHH organization was founded by the Turkish leader and hero of the Islamic world, Tayyip Erdogan. And how I wished, as we entered the Arab world, that the Arab countries had a leader like Erdogan. What a difference the Muslim world would be in if they were all led by Erdogans. I have never forgotten the performance at Davos when, in the face of the killer, Perez, Erdogan called him a child killer, told him how good he was at killing children, and stood up, unhooked his microphone, and began to walk off the stage. But I've never forgotten the actions of the Secretary General of the Arab League, who was also on the platform, who got up to applaud Erdogan as he walked off, and then sat down again to continue his dialogue with the killer, Shimon Peres. What kind of a disgrace to the Arab world was that? Well, of course, it didn't come as a surprise to any of us. But it would have come as a surprise even to the most cynical of you, that when we 550, with hundreds of vehicles, arrived at the port of Al Arish in Egypt, having had to detour from Aqaba all the way back to Syria to take aeroplanes and charter a huge ship to take our vehicles to Al Arish, and then fly in 3 separate aeroplanes to Al Arish airport, which is a tiny airstrip, because of the intransigence of the Egyptian government. Once there in the port, as you will have seen on television, we were locked up like animals, day after day. No one was allowed out. No one was allowed in. There were no toilet facilities. We had a large number of women on our convoy who didn't even have a toilet to go to, nor a place to wash in. We were treated like the worst kind of criminals by an Arab Muslim country, when all we were trying to do was take medicine to the Palestinian people who were dying for the want of it, just a few kilometers from where we were imprisoned. There's a wonderful piece of film. You can get it on my website, georgegalloway.com, or find it on YouTube, of a young boy who was on our convoy, half Scottish, half Algerian, speaking in perfect classical Arabic, beseeching the Egyptian soldiers not to attack us. All we were doing, he said, was taking the medicine to women who could be your mothers, could be your sisters, could be your daughters. Hasibun, he was telling them, judge yourselves before God judges you. Hasibun, Hasibun, he kept saying. Some of the Egyptian soldiers were crying at the beauty of the words that he was speaking. But when the order came, they attacked us with savagery which even the Israeli army would never have done to foreigners. 55 of our 550 entered Gaza the next day, still bleeding from the attacks of these Egyptian security forces. And we entered Gaza with this huge convoy, which had been massively publicized as a result of the attack, as a result of the blocking of the convoy, to a predictable welcome from the Palestinians in Gaza. And huge though our aid was, it was, of course, again, just a drop in the ocean of troubles afflicting the Palestinians under siege. Just because it's not on the television now, don't forget what's happening there. People are eating food from garbage heaps. 80%, 80, it's a magic number. 80% of the Palestinians in Gaza are unemployed. 80% of them are living on less than $1 a day. And 80% of the children of Gaza are medically, clinically suffering from malnutrition or undernutrition. People can't get medicine, can't get medical help, can't get out for operations, are imprisoned and besieged in this tiny piece of land, 25 miles long, 4.5 miles wide. And they're imprisoned not just by Israel, but by the Arab Republic of Egypt, the great Egypt, the Egypt of Jamal Abdel Nasser, the Egypt of Al-Azhar, the Egypt which liberated the Suez Canal. Its name is being dragged through the dust by the tin pot dictatorship of Hosni Mubarak. And when there's no, I know not, some of you don't like me saying that, but there's no getting away from this. I kept quiet for years about this dictatorship, but I can keep quiet about it no longer. I know that in politics, I've always followed the rule that I will never say something I don't believe, but I don't have to say everything that I believe. Sometimes it's necessary to be diplomatically quiet. But I tell you, if it was not for the dictatorship in Egypt, there would be no siege on Gaza. The Rafah gate could be open. All those children could have food, could have medicine. The doctors could come and go. There would be no siege if it were not for the collaborator regime, for the moment, still in power in Cairo. And when we left Gaza, my friend Ron Mackay with the camera there and I, we left in the dead of night because we were told that something was going to happen to me. And we didn't want it to happen when we were with 550 people, because we knew the result would be violence, and we'd had enough violence from the Egyptian regime. So we left at the dead of night, were arrested by plainclothes mukhabarat, driven to the airport, forced into the airport, followed around the airport, even to the toilets. And then an official stepped forward and told me I was being deported from Egypt and I was being declared persona non grata, which for the non-Latin speakers amongst you means a person without status. Well, I say here now, and I'll go on saying, the people who are without status in Egypt are the Mubarak dictatorship, who are hated by the vast majority of the people of that country. At the same time, they announced there would be no more convoys would be allowed to enter Gaza through Egypt. And of course, none can enter Gaza through Israel, so they thought that they had stopped the efforts to break the siege on Gaza. But they forgot about the sea. For those who have the courage to take to it, it is possible to enter Gaza by sea, and that's what we'll be doing under the leadership of the Turkish IHH in just a few days' time. There are many tensions, many difficulties. State politics, international politics is of course involved. But the convoy goes with the blessing of Erdogan and the government of Turkey. Most of the people and most of the ships and most of the aid are Turkish. So Israel faces a choice. They have said that they will stop this flotilla, if necessary by force, on the high seas from entering Gaza. Well, if Israel uses force to stop this flotilla, they will be placing themselves on a collision course with a Turkey that is growing stronger, whose prestige is growing with every day that passes. And the remaining relations between Israel and Turkey will be gravely imperiled. I don't know if the ships will get through. We are not responsible for whether or not they get through. On the judgment day, on the last day, we will be asked by the Almighty not what other people did, but what we did. And we'll be able to say, we tried to take ships into Gaza. Israel can answer for any refusal of the humanitarian aid that we are trying to take through. But we at least will be able to place before the Almighty our own records and our own efforts. And we hope that they will be received in the spirit in which we embark on this great journey. Viva Palestina is a part of the convoy under the leadership of IHH. Viva Palestina USA exists. I hope you'll go to its website. I hope you'll support its work, vivapalestinausa.org. But I wanted to talk to you about the next project after this flotilla. I am organizing a summer university of Palestine in Lebanon on the 25th of July this year, in a beautiful university in the Bekaa Valley with first-class accommodation, separate accommodation for women and men. We're bringing speakers from all over the world. Finkelstein from the United States, speakers from all over the Arab world, speakers from Britain and Europe, the top speakers on Palestine. The university will last for 1 week from the 25th of July. It's an attempt to create 500 newly empowered and better educated activists who can listen to speeches, who can react to those speeches, who can talk and learn from each other and amongst themselves, who can learn how to give interviews, how to conduct interviews, how better to write things, how better to present our case. And if it works, we'll hold another one at Christmas, New Year in Aqaba, and then another one next summer, again in Lebanon. Every year we'll have a summer University of Palestine until Palestine is free, when we'll be able to hold it in the Holy Land eventually. I hope some of you will come. Bear in mind, you can't enter Lebanon if you have an Israel stamp in your passport. But if you're interested, go to the vivapalestina.org website. Click on Viva Palestina Arabia, which is the Arab section of Viva Palestina, which is organizing this summer university. We have many tasks. We have much work to do. But I honestly believe that we are winning. Israel has spent massively from its account of political capital in the world. Don't believe their bluster. The more they bluster, the more they're seeking to disguise their steadily weakening military and political strength. Just since 2006, in the attack on Lebanon, the massacre in Gaza, the murder in Dubai, the humiliation of Vice President Biden, the insult to the United States, as Secretary Clinton put it, that was delivered to the Vice President of your country. The farce of Netanyahu being left in the White House all alone with President Obama walking out of his own office and telling Netanyahu, "Call me when you have something to say." The humiliation by Netanyahu of Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, leaving him standing at the airport with nobody to receive him. The Secretary of the United Nations, which brought this so-called Israel into being in the first place. The banning of Richard Goldstone from attending the bar mitzvah of his own grandchild, a citizen of Israel, because Goldstone had the temerity to tell the truth in the Goldstone report about the attack on Gaza. The banning of 82-year-old old-age pensioner Professor Noam Chomsky, an intellectual of world rank, the forbidding of Chomsky to enter the occupied territory. Incident after incident demonstrating not Israel's strength but its weakness. And don't forget, as if you ever could, when you hear talk of Israel going to attack this one or that one, Israel going to bomb this country or that country. The last time they bombed a country, Lebanon, the Lebanese people gave them a good hiding and sent them back where they came from and demonstrated once and for all that the days of military superiority for the state of Israel in the Middle East are gone for good. The natives are restless. The empire is striking back and capable of striking back. So, Israel is weaker. We are stronger. Our arguments are now carrying. Despite the efforts of all these dogs barking, I was given a proper welcome at JFK Airport this afternoon. The US government does not want to stop me speaking here in the way the Israeli government wanted to stop Chomsky speaking there. And that's a sign also that we are beginning to make progress here. Finally, I say this, as I've said now twice already this evening. There is no more important battleground than here. And you are the people in that intellectual battle. There's no point in saying, Obama hasn't done this, Obama hasn't said that. We have to change the political conditions here in the country so that Obama can say and do things that he needs to say and do. President Obama knows the truth. As I always say, he doesn't have the alibi the last fellow had of being an imbecile. This president is a professor. He's the smartest president you ever had. And he knows the truth. I know because I've spoken to him. There's nothing he doesn't know about the truth in Palestine. But we have to create the political conditions in the United States that it is not electoral suicide for him to tell the truth. AMP is a small acorn. It's just founded here in Brooklyn. It's only been going a few years. But look at the distance that we have to travel. The Israel lobby in the United States alone, let alone what they're sending to Israel, is spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on propaganda in this country. They're spending millions of dollars just sending people to Israel to persuade them that that's what it's called. They're taking full-page ads in the New York Times, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, to tell people that Jerusalem means nothing to Muslims. It's not even mentioned in the Quran. Palestine is of no religious significance to Muslims. Well, there are just as many Muslims in America as there are Jews. The Muslims in America are just as wealthy and just as talented as the Jews in America. And many of the Jews in America are on our side.
whilst all of the Muslims in America ought to be on our side. There's no reason why you couldn't raise $300 million a year. There's no reason why you couldn't have full-page ads in the New York Times. It's a matter of being prepared to put our money where our mouth is, to stand up and be counted so that that flag can fly in Jerusalem in our lifetime or in our children's lifetime. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much indeed.